Actually, because I was a girl, I was not expected to do science. I was expected to learn cookery and needlework. But I wanted to do science, and my parents fought for me to learn science. So the science class had, in the end, 3 girls and all the boys. And we were the first 3 girls to do science in that school. I liked physics the best of the 3 sciences that we did. It came very easily, naturally to me. And I continued good at physics throughout my school career. Reckoned that I would do a physics degree ultimately, and wondered what kind of physics I would specialize in. And in school, we were learning about motion in a circle, centrifugal force and centripetal force. And at home, I was reading my father's library book, which was an astronomy book by Fred Hoyle. And he was talking about galaxies and how galaxies rotate. And I suddenly saw the link between physics and stars and galaxies. So decided I would be an astronomer when I grew up. I was born in 1943 during what we call the Second World War. And the men were all away fighting and the women were doing all sorts of things. But at the end of that war, when the men were coming home, the government had to get the women out of those jobs to make them free for the men. And so suddenly there's great emphasis on women as homemakers. And women are not expected to work. Indeed, women are discouraged from working. And so the school would have liked to have taught us needlework and cookery. And that was very much the ambiance when I was a girl. And it hung around for a very long time in Britain. So it was considered unusual for women to have careers, unusual for women to do anything serious at university. You went to university to find a man. Fortunately, things have changed since then. There are many, many, many experiences. One that I think says quite a lot is that when I became pregnant, expecting a baby, I went to my head of department, head of physics department, and said, what maternity leave am I entitled to? This was 1973. And the head of department said, maternity leave? I've never heard of it. And he was right. The university had no maternity leave. So society has had to change a lot in my lifetime. I can give you an example of something that I was involved in as one of a group. It's called the Athena Swan scheme. There was a group of senior women scientists, myself included, who would meet after work at their own expense in their own time to see what could be done to help women in science in universities and get more women coming through in science in universities. And we struggled until one of us had a very good idea. She was a bit of a psychologist. She said, you know, university presidents, university vice chancellors, they were all men at that stage. She said, they are very competitive men. If we create a competition for the most woman-friendly university, they will compete. Now, we were very poor, but we could afford a glass rose bowl. So we got a glass rose bowl and we announced this competition for the most woman-friendly university. And a number of universities competed and we looked at their cases and we awarded the Rose Bowl. And next year we ran it again, and there were more universities competing. And after a few years, we thought, right, we now need to get this better established. And we created what became known as the Athena Swan scheme. One of the best universities had a scheme that was recognized and people applied for the awards, but it really began to take off when the funding bodies, the grant-giving bodies, said, you must hold an Athena Swan Award before you can apply for our money. And it went whoosh. And it got extended beyond science to arts and humanities, where the question is not where are the women, but where are the men? So it became gender equality across the whole of academia. And then it got exported to Ireland and to Canada, and I think to Australia, if I remember rightly. And then it's also gone to the USA, but it has developed there into not just gender, but race and disability and all diversity issues. It stems from my experience as a graduate student, a PhD student. I went to the University of Cambridge. When I got there, discovered that I was one of very few women, and I was one of very few people who did not come from the southeast of England. I came from the north and west of the country, which is considered a little bit rough, backward, outlandish, you know, by those in the southeast. I'm sure that would be disputed, but that's what I felt. And I became quite convinced that they had made a mistake admitting me, that they were going to discover their mistake and throw me out. We now recognize these feelings. We call it in English, imposter syndrome. And if you work in a prestigious place, it's something you have to look out for. At the time, we didn't label it. My way of handling this situation was to say, right, well, they are going to throw me out at some stage, but until they throw me out, I'm staying here. I'm working my very hardest so that when they throw me out, I'll know I've done my best. And it was because of that attitude that I discovered the Pulsars as a graduate student. So fast forward to today, I'm thinking, if we could get more minority students doing physics, it certainly would be very good for physics because diversity is good, but maybe they also would work very hard to justify their place in the department and make some kind of breakthrough. So the funding that the Institute of Physics handles goes to graduate students from minority groups in physics. People who are disabled, people of color, females, any group that is anything other than white men, basically. So it's an attempt to increase diversity in physics departments, because I think diversity of itself is good. I think it involves a lot of education, to be honest. And the best way to educate scientific men is by having data. So the kind of data that one collects for an Athena Swan Award has proved very useful in demonstrating that women do not typically progress as fast as men, that the women are still underrepresented, and will get people wondering why, and they begin to think about things like unconscious bias. We all have it for various things, different things. It's part of being human. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but we do need to recognize that we will each have unconscious bias of some sort. Often we have to fill out forms, and amongst other things, the form will ask which sex or gender we are. And typically there will be some boxes to tick. In the past, there were just 2 boxes. These days, there will be more than 2 because other options besides the 2 genders are offered. But it's clearest if I stick to the 2 gender example. So on a British form, there might be, which sex or gender you are, and 2 boxes, one labeled M for male and one labeled F for female. And then you stop and look at what order are these boxes presented in? Which one comes first? And very, very often it is the male. But in the alphabet, F comes before M, not after. It's unconscious bias that's putting the male box first. I don't know enough about how it is in other countries in Europe, but in Britain, toy shops, children's toy shops, there'll probably be a pink section for the girls' toys and a blue section for the boys' toys. And if you look at the words advertisers use to describe toys for girls and toys for boys, the description of girls' toys is very passive, emphasis on pretty, princess, pink, tea sets, cookers. For boys, it's construction kits and action and leadership and dynamic. And given that gender separation way, way preschool, is it surprising that we lack women in the sciences in Britain? No, we have to sort out the gendering or that gendering of children at a very young age. If they're clear that they want to do physics, super, great, fantastic. It is a brilliant subject. It's quite hard work, but if you work hard, ignore some of the negatives, you'll do brilliantly.